All right. Hello, guys. Welcome back to Curiosity. Here's another Lance Bush video. I'm talking to Lance on call after that debate he had with Mike Humer for the first time. It's been one and a half months. I've been super busy, but I finally have him here. And we're going to review a video in which Isaac Brown, or Ask Yourself, critiques Alex O'Connor and his metaethics. So Alex tries to discover morality, a universal morality. Although he's a subjectivist, he tries to discover a universal morality and bases it on pleasure. He says that all desires can be broken down to pleasure, but Ask Yourself doesn't believe in that, and he critiques Alex, and it's a fun conversation between them. And this is a review that he made of that fun conversation that we had and they had. And now we are going to review, me and Lance are going to review that video, and we're going to have extra inputs from Lance on that and more insights from him. Yeah, so it's going to be a chill one. So let's start it, Lance.
All right. Yeah, I should say I don't recall this video at all. It looks like something I think I've listened to at least once or twice, and I guess we'll see. Maybe some of it will start coming back to me. You mentioned that Alex is a subjectivist. I see that the video is from 4 years ago. Alex is currently calling himself a non-cognitivist and in particular an emotivist. So I don't know if his view has changed.
Okay,
or
no. So by subjectivist, I just meant that anti-realist.
I see.
Understanding. I didn't go precise over there. Yeah, he is a non-cognitivist. Yeah. So,
yeah.
But,
I'm totally getting pedantic about the terminology. So
I know. You ought to be ought in the subjective sense.
And the other thing that's really funny is like we're getting super meta here because we're doing a review of a review. We're reviewing a review about metaethics. So we're doing metaethics, I guess.
Metaethics, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like metaception or something. Maybe that's a good title for the video. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, let's get started. I often do these like 20-minute preambles before I even get started on a review. So I want to push past that and just get going. So let's get going now.
No, today I'm going to do a little critique.
Oh, sorry. You started saying something.
No, I was saying you can do that if you want, but it depends on how much time you have. I have like 6 hours maybe, but yeah.
I don't have a ton of time. I got other stuff to do today. So we'll get started. I know. Let me know if the volume sounds like... Does the volume sound okay here?
Today I'm going to do a little critique, friendly critique of Alex O'Connor, a.k.a. Cosmic Skeptic.
Well, the first thing to say he's doing a friendly critique of Alex. I will do a friendly commentary on Ask Yourself and Alex. They're both anti-realists. They, I think, have their meta-ethical views are on the right track. So I don't really tend to find myself disagreeing with them about these sorts of issues. So we'll see what we can make of this.
You will disagree with Alex a lot here, I'm sure.
Quite possibly. Yeah. But it's interesting because I just said recently, I should do more critiques of other anti-realists, given that my anti-realist views tend to be different from pretty much every other anti-realist, and Alex is an exception. I'm not an emotivist. I'm not a non-cognitivist. I don't think that's the correct ethical stance to take. So, okay, let's get started.
Yeah.
A while ago, I had a conversation with him, Rationality Rules, and Vegan Gains. In that conversation, Alex made a claim that I found very dubious. I started arguing with him about it, and actually got him to concede partially. But unfortunately, having just checked into his channel, he still seems to be saying the very kind of thing I showed a problem with. I should state that I don't think this is because he's a bad actor. Currently, I have no reason to think that. Most likely, he just doesn't appreciate the critique. And that's roughly what motivated me to make this video. I ran a stable critique of his view, and very few people seem to have appreciated it. Shout out Insub. Clearly, Alex himself didn't. So I felt that I should dedicate a video specifically to this critique to get some eyes on it. With any luck, other people will appreciate it and start asking Alex to deal with it. Then maybe Alex will re-examine the critique and notice that it demands attention. Or Alex might just watch this video directly and realize that the critique demands attention. What we're going to do here is firstly watch the clip of...
So this is at a time when he had 312,000 subscribers. He recently crossed 1 million. So congrats to Alex for that.
Oh, that's right. He was doing a 1 million subscriber stream yesterday, and I saw that it went on for hours and hours, and he had guests, and they were all like chilling on a couch talking. It looked like a lot of fun. I tuned in at a couple points, and they were talking about like Bible stuff that doesn't really interest me very much, so I just tuned out pretty quickly.
Mm.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, just not really my thing.
Right, right. And I saw he had a guitar in his hand. I don't know whether he played some song or something. He sang
I didn't
something.
see
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it was
Well,
there, but I didn't click that. I didn't have enough time, like I told you.
Yeah, he also rebranded. He's no longer Cosmic Skeptic. He just goes by his
Yeah.
name, Alex O'Connor. I very much approve of that rebranding. Like, I don't have a problem with the name Cosmic Skeptic. It sounds cool. I like space. I like skepticism. But
Mhm.
I think the rationale he gave for that was cool. Like was pretty convincing. Also, yeah, good symbol. I like the little like planety thing. It just looks cool.
That
So
one, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
but
I've been thinking
that's
of
a lot of
making
stuff.
one for myself. Not cooler than you though. Yours is like amazing. L with
Well,
the L and I.
Yeah, I got that. I had, what is the site, Fiverr? I got it from a graphic designer on Fiverr, so the credit goes to them.
Okay,
Um,
great.
they did an awesome job. I kind of had a
Coolest
rough
ever.
idea of what I was looking for, but they hit it out of the park. I'm really happy with it. That's what part of the reason I stick it everywhere. But yeah, you should get some cool branding.
I should get
You know,
one. I should get one. Yeah. It's been a
yeah,
long. It's been like 4 or 5 years that I've been using the same display picture. I have to change it.
yeah. When we first talked, I was like, curiosity, got to go with a cat, and I remember using a cat image for us having a
Yeah.
conversation. If you like cats, that might be something to go with, but I don't know if
Nice
that's your thing.
idea. Let me think about it. I'm thinking about cat doing this kind of thing. Let me think.
Yeah. What the image I used was a cat in robes. I don't know if you remember,
Yeah, I
but
remember
like the
that.
idea of a cat in like a Greek like chiton, like the robe kind of thing that they
Yeah.
wear. I like that imagery.
Wise cat.
You could use a
Let me think.
9 because like cats have 9 lives. I don't know.
Oh, is it?
I don't know. What else
Lots of
symbolizes
ideas.
curiosity? Yeah,
Curiosity.
you could just go with a C.
I was thinking about this kind of symbol. That
Yeah,
one.
something like that would be cool.
Cat is a good thing. Cat is a good thing, or an owl. But yeah, cat is a better thing. Better idea, I guess. Let me think about it. Oh, lots to think about.
Yeah, and like cats are like for whatever reason real popular. Like there's lots of memes, lots of imagery with
I
cats.
know.
The internet is all about cats.
Right. So think about the future and memes and all. That's a good idea as well. Let me see. Cat is a good idea. I'll
All
talk to
right.
some graphic designer myself then. Yeah. Let's
Okay, should we
restart.
get more into the video?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Of my conversation with Alex where we argue about metaethics and I'll give commentary. I'm often tempted to just explain concepts on their own, but I think walking you guys through how this critique occurred to me in real time during the conversation might help make it more clear, mainly for those among you who don't spend a lot of time with philosophy or logic. After that, I'll show you how Alex's current statements seem to open him to the same critique. Okay, let's start by watching the clip where Alex and I argue.
So, like, I would say, like, if you are talking to somebody who is, like, a psychopath, sociopath, or maybe not even, like, they, for whatever reason, they just think, oh, killing animals is fine, I would kind of, like, I'd start talking about the social consequences of, like, meat eating, animal agriculture, killing animals, with those sorts of people, because that seems to be the only thing they care about. Like, ultimately, there are just really selfish people, but you can appeal to selfishness. Like, and again, the guy went, like, vegan technically because for selfish reasons, health.
Do you think there's a fact of the matter that he's wrong about when he disagrees with your values?
No, and I'm I'm an existential nihilist. I don't think there's, like, meaning or value to anything. I just think we apply our own subjective values to things. And I don't think he's wrong in any way in believing what he believes. It's just that there are ways of appealing to certain people. Like, everyone has some sort of value. He values his own life and existence and well-being. So there are still ways of arguing morality with these people, just because morality by nature is social.
Well,
I think it's.
No, go ahead, please.
I think it's simpler than that. I disagree with you both that there are irresoluble conflicts when it comes to people's interests.
Okay, so that's where the critique begins to form. We're all talking about reasoning with people who have very different values, and Alex says that he doesn't believe that there are irresoluble conflicts of interest. Now, when I heard that, what happens in my mind is I go, well, I definitely don't have that belief. Why is it that Alex believes that?
I think that every single person has an interest towards their own pleasure, almost by definition.
I'd agree with you there.
And therefore, when you talk about
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. This reminds me of, I think, the first video we did
Yeah,
was on
exactly.
this idea. And I think there was some of the same people in that conversation. Was it Rationality Rules and Alex talking to
Yeah,
each other?
rationality rules and Alex. So they were of the view that everything can be broken down to pleasure, and all that people value is actually pleasure when it's
Yeah.
broken down into its fundamental nature. Yeah. So
Yeah,
they did a
so-
critique of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I still can't recall what Ask Yourself ended up saying about it. I do like what Vegan Gain said there. I don't know about that terminology, existential nihilism, but
Yeah.
when people are engaged in attempts at moral persuasion, I do see them as very much a social enterprise. For me, it's a practical social question. All sorts of stuff goes into persuasion that doesn't require a belief in stance-independent moral truth or moral realism. You can appeal to inconsistency in a person's values. This is why things like Name the Trait can be dialectically very effective with people in exposing the lack of a rationale for why they think what they think about eating animal products. Exposing people. It doesn't have to be inconsistency. It could just be a person doesn't realize that given some principle or commitment or perspective that they have, that some downstream belief that they have is inconsistent. Well, I guess that is inconsistency. But I don't mean inconsistency in terms of commitment to two principles that are inconsistent. You could fail to recognize that you're committed to some principle, and then stuff downstream of it doesn't really accord with it. So, that's another thing you could expose, is that a person's sort of a more proximal beliefs are out of accord with their more fundamental beliefs. There's all sorts of basically you could be appealing to intersubjective or shared values, like, hey, look, I have these values. I think you probably have these values too. And if you reflect on what I believe to be our shared values, you may discover that this practice you engage in or this belief that you have doesn't really stand up to scrutiny. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. You do not have to presuppose, some sort of stance-independent normative facts. So, yeah, I'm fully on board with characterizing it in social terms. A lot more concise than the way I would put it. But yeah, let's see where Isaac goes with this.
I think consistency. Sorry to interrupt. Consistency becomes one of the most important things as an anti-realist, then, because there are no stance-independent moral facts. So, as long as you're consistent with your own principles, then you're good to go as an anti-realist, I think.
Yeah, in principle, you may not care about consistency. I happen to care, and I haven't met any anti-realists that are completely unconcerned with whether their beliefs are like logically contradictory or something. But you could have that view. I don't know what I would say to a person with a view like that, but you could.
Yeah, that's true. But that's rarest of the rarest, I think. As long as one is interested in philosophy, mostly they would be interested in logic as well. But then you have paraconsistent logic and dialectics and whatever. But yeah, like I said, they're rare. So
it's pretty rare. I don't think I've ever had a sustained conversation with somebody that rejects classical logic in the context of the conversation I was having.
You just can't tell, I think. I haven't had either, but I'm imagining what does it mean to have a consistent conversation with a dialectist. I just can't imagine doing that.
Yeah, and you could always have some sort of absurdist or something.
Exactly. 2-3 sentences in, and I'm having no clue what to say, because everything is true and everything is false at the same time.
There's probably a way of navigating conversations with a person that holds views like that. Anyway, I don't know what that would look like, though.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, let's get back.
All right. I'm going to take it back a little because I think they had started to say a couple things. Okay,
yeah, sure.
Here we go.
That every single person has an interest towards their own pleasure, almost by definition.
I'd agree with you there.
And therefore, when you talk about arguing from selfishness, it can be done. All argumentation for morality is an argument from selfishness. I think that the way that morality, the way that it works, is by the maximization of one's own pleasure. This is where I wouldn't be a utilitarian in the normative sense, where they go from they make the jump from saying that because I desire my own pleasure, that means pleasure is good, which means that the general pleasure is good for everyone. I'm sticking with the first proposition. I just think that my pleasure is good, just as Stephen thinks his pleasure is good, and just as everybody thinks that their own pleasure is good. That to me is a psychological fact. That's an unavoidable fact. That's the objectivity at the basis of morality. Now, what I can do is say, I can argue about what will objectively maximize someone's pleasure. What I can't do is tell them why they should value their pleasure, but I know that they do, and I know that I do. So in the same way that where what Isaac you might do, if you think that there are irresoluble moral conflicts somewhere, you would generally just find the point at which you agree. Usually you don't have to go all the way down to pleasure. We all agree with certain slightly higher level claims about morality, and I think that seems to be, Isaac, where you're laying the subjectivity. You're saying that people have certain interests, like someone has an interest for their own health. Well, I don't think they have an interest for their own health. I think they have an interest for the pleasure that derives from being in good health. The desire isn't aimed at the thing itself. So all of the subjectivity lies in this single proposition that my pleasure is a good thing. Everything else is an objective derivative. That's what I would say.
Okay, so at this point, Alex has said a bunch of things that weird me out, but in the interest of keeping this video streamlined, I'm not going to do an analysis on his entire comment. What's going on in my mind right now in the conversation is I'm going, okay, the claim that I've latched onto, that I'm trying to understand why Alex believes, is that there aren't irresoluble value differences. I'm not understanding his reasoning for that. I have some loose idea. So I'm going to ask clarificatory questions until I understand exactly why he believes that. Then I'll be able to determine if I agree with his reasoning or not.
Yeah. Okay. So one or two things. So first of all, one claim that you're making is that like every human has this like shared motivation of pleasure. So it can't be that there's an unresolvable conflict of values because
every living creature, in fact, yeah.
Okay. Now, just so I can make the point, though, say that there's an agent that we just construct somehow. Maybe it's like an AI, and it just doesn't have that goal. Would you have an irresolvable conflict of values with that thing?
It wouldn't be sentient. It wouldn't be able to do anything consciously. If you don't have a conception of pleasure and pain, then you don't have a conception of preference. And if you don't have a conception of preference, then you have no motivation to action. So you'd just be a vegetable.
Why would you need?
Wow, that's a strange claim. What do you have thoughts on that?
Can you play that again?
Yeah, sure.
Agent that we just construct, so there's an unresolvable conflict. One claim that you're making is that like every human has this like shared motivation of pleasure. So it can't be that there's an unresolvable conflict of values because
every living creature, in fact, yeah.
Okay. Now, just so I can make the point, though, say that there's an agent that we just construct somehow. Maybe it's like an AI, and it just doesn't have that goal. Would you have an irresolvable conflict of values with that thing?
It wouldn't be sentient. It wouldn't be able to do anything consciously. If you don't have a conception of pleasure and pain, then you don't have a conception of preference. And if you don't have a conception of preference, then you have no motivation to action. So
Okay, so I could already, I can't recall exactly what Ask Yourself ends up saying, but my guess is that Alex is either going to have to trivialize the notion of pleasure and pain by just basically making it definitionally equivalent, like analytically equivalent to like preference in this context.
Proclivity, preference, or something.
Yeah, having pleasure and pain pleasure and pain is pursuing what one prefers or disprefers or something like that.
Yeah.
And so he's either saying something trivial like preferences or preferences, or he's making a claim that I don't think he could support, that pleasure and pain are somehow conceptually and maybe metaphysically distinct from preferences and dispreferences, but that nevertheless, you can't have preferences that are not reducible to a concern for pleasure and pain, which sounds very, very implausible. So I think that's going to be the problem that we're going to get to, that basically it's either saying something trivial or something extremely contentious that I'm not sure that he could really support.
So basically, in that view, we can also consider a positive ion that has an affinity towards electrons as having preference towards those electrons, which can be called to as having a desire for electrons or something. So yeah, that's a strange kind of view. Are ions conscious? Unless you're a panpsychist or something, no, we know that they're not conscious, or at least that's what we think. So that's a strange kind of view. And later on, he ends up saying that like pleasure and desire are kind of synonymous and tautologous, and that's what he will end up saying later. So yeah.
I don't know what he would say about like protons having preferences. My suspicion is that he would say that he definitely does not think that, and that it might require baking into a bit more psychological substance into the idea of a preference or dispreference. It may be something like a disposition for something to act with intent, and like he may cash it out in potentially functionalist terms or some other sort of terms. I don't know what he would end up saying or doing, but I think he would resist the characterization that he would be committed to that. So he would have to flesh the notion out more to resist that, which is fine. It's like, if you're presenting part of a position, you don't have to present the whole thing at the same time simultaneously. So there could be a position here that just isn't vulnerable to that particular concern, but we would need to hear more to really know. But we'll see where Isaac takes it. Again, I'm pretty sure I've seen this before at least once or twice. So if I'm anticipating anything in advance, that could be some memories trickling in from my unconscious somewhere. We'll see. Ready?
Or maybe you already know the response, even if you haven't watched it.
Maybe. I don't think so, because I'm pretty sure that I have seen this. So let's see.
You'd just be a vegetable.
Why would you need... Okay, so I think that we might have some problems here. So just before delving into it, I think that there's okay, so it seems to me, first of all, like it is totally coherent and like logically possible to picture an agent that has a preference for something, but that doesn't have, that can't experience pleasure or something like that. So we probably disagree about that. We'll have to talk about if that makes sense. But then if we grant that such a being exists, surely then we agree that we have it's possible to have an irresolvable difference of values, right?
I imagine so, but I simply can't grant that premise by definition.
Okay,
I think
let's talk it through.
Derived from pleasure.
Okay, so why is it that you can't have a desire without pleasure being attached to it?
Because pleasure is the only thing that's it's psychologically possible to desire, to the extent that pleasure is by definition what is wanted when experienced, in the same way that pain is by definition.
You do think that it's possible to be conscious without pleasure and pain involved, right? Obviously, we can find examples for that, right?
Well, I think so, but it's really going to depend on... So if you define pleasure and pain as something like having a disposition to act in the pursuit of goals, and then you tell me that there's an agent with goals, well, then it cares about pleasure and pain, but that's just because you've tautologically defined pleasure and pain to refer to its goals. But so, can you be a conscious being without goals? I don't know. It doesn't seem to me like you couldn't. That it's not possible. I don't know. Maybe if you do a bunch of meditation, I've done a bit here and there. You get into a state of mind where it seems like there's a stream of consciousness, but you're not actively pursuing any particular goals or interests. On the other hand, maybe you are. Maybe that requires a certain kind of focus or motivation to remain in that state of mind. I don't know. I certainly wouldn't be confident enough to say that there couldn't be rather divergent modes of consciousness from the ones I'm familiar with, and that I'm familiar with from interacting with humans, where I would say both that the being in question is conscious and that it doesn't have goals or preferences. That I think is an interesting question. My guess is, you could just not have them. But when it comes to this identification with pleasure and pain with preferences, that, like the way I think about pleasure and pain, you could certainly have an agent that could have preferences, but it just doesn't prefer pleasure and pain. I see those as a certain kind of affective state that is motivating for people, but it's not the exclusive motivator for any conceivable agent. So I don't really agree with Alex's identification here of pleasure and pain with preferences. Again, if he wants to stipulate that he's defining them that way, that's fine. But then I would just say, okay, well, I have a different conception of pleasure and pain. I'd refer to these specific types of psychological states, and then I'd refer to some other type of psychological state as something a little different. So there could be just some terminological stuff going on here that's obscuring differences in actual views about what's in fact the case.
Definition, what is not wanted when experienced.
So is pleasure a brain state?
Yes.
Is it the same brain state as desire?
Well, desire isn't so much a brain. Is desire a brain state?
So here's where I start tripping Alex out a bit, obviously. Now, what's going through my mind right now, I'm still kind of asking clarificatory questions. It probably seems a little disorganized what I'm asking, because it is a little disorganized. I'm asking, like, is it possible to have an agent that has a desire but pleasure isn't attached to it? Is pleasure a brain state? I'm still trying to overall kind of assess what his position is saying, but now it's starting to coalesce a bit. I'm starting to go like, okay, look, are pleasure and desire separate things? If they are, you're going to have to show that one entails the other to say everyone desires pleasure. And if they're the same thing, but with different words, then it's not meaningful to say everyone desires pleasure. It's just going to be a tautology. And you're not going to be able to say, therefore, there aren't irresolvable value differences, because all we know is that people desire what they desire. So the critique is starting to coalesce at this point.
Surely there's a brain state or some kind of like general type of brain state that corresponds to desire. Because I think you're going to hit a problem there, because they're not going to, like, I don't think they're like analytically the same thing or necessarily entail each other.
So a lot of people have criticized me for being circular when it comes to that part of it, but I actually don't have a problem with seeing the two terms as essentially synonymous.
Now, at this point, the critique is still coalescing. It's not fully formed, but it's got enough structure to it that I'm able to tell that Alex just stepped in shit. You can see it on my face the second that he says that they're essentially synonymous, right? Because if they're synonymous, then all it means to say everyone desires pleasure, setting aside a little grammatic weirdness, is everyone desires what they desire. Now,
it must be that I have some dim recollection that this was where he was taking this, because I don't think that would have jumped out to me immediately up until this point here, where I might have been like, okay, now we've got a problem. But certainly triviality objections. I mean, there's a reason, As Yourself and I tend to leverage similar sorts of objections against views like these.
Right.
And this sort of emptiness of analytic definitions that just sort of hollow out, like, hey, all X's are Y's. And you're like, well, what do you mean by X? Well, I mean Y. What do you mean by Y? I mean X. Okay. And so, Alex here seems to be aware that people have leveraged this objection, because he mentions, people have accused me of circularity. I think perhaps rightly so. So, this was, just to acknowledge for people watching this was a video from 4 years ago. I kind of feel bad when we are reviewing these videos from 4 years ago, because everybody's views have really developed in the interim, and so I have no idea what Alex would make of this now. He may think, hey, I was wrong here, and develop since then. So, I want to see this as really an evaluation of a sort of time capsule of a discussion that people were having, and not so much a critique of, like, I'm not taking this to be a critique of Alex's current views.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But I think Isaac did approach Alex for that, but he has been evasive. Many people have kind of requested Alex for a conversation with Isaac, but it didn't happen. I think I have commented on one of his Twitter posts or something, and that may obviously get ignored, but I think he's left messages unread as well. But yeah, Isaac is waiting for that. I spoke to Isaac, and he told me that he has been trying to approach Alex, but he has been evasive. But I don't know why that is. Has his view changed or not? I'm not sure. But I don't think it has. I think he still holds the same kind of view. I think it's in the vague territory still, but not sure. We will obviously have to ask him to know what his new current views are. But yeah, if that conversation ever happens, then that would be great. Or I'm also vouching for a conversation between you and Alex. That needs to happen sometime in the future for sure. As soon as possible, the better. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've reached out to Alex, but I haven't heard back. Now, to be fair, when you hit 1 million subscribers, I'm sure he gets a flood of email and messages and whatever platforms he's on. So that's a lot to filter through. And I have a very tiny channel. I'm not a notorious person by any means for the anti-realist stuff. It would be great to talk to Alex. I especially would like to talk to him about the non-cognitivism, emotivism type stuff. I think that there's a lot to discuss in terms of perhaps a more robust and reflective approach to his metaethical stance. Pretty much every time I see him talk about that, he doesn't.
He always says he's an emotivist.
Right, but I don't see him develop arguments or really engage with the standard criticisms of it. He just is, and to be fair, in a lot of these contexts, he's just trying to get out what his view is, and a lot of times he's talking to more general audiences. It's not like I see him talking to academic meta-ethicists, and so just trying to get people to understand the view. Like, just for instance, I'm a pragmatist. I would say 90% of the time that I'm talking about pragmatism is just trying to explain to people what it is, and then having them go, "What are you talking about? I don't get it." Or asking questions, sometimes insulting me and saying that that's a stupid view. But very rarely is it like a sustained argument with someone that's familiar with pragmatism and is arguing with it. So I think he's operating in a lot of those contexts, and I want to be fair to that. But if he hasn't had that conversation yet with Ask Yourself, I would love to see it. I'd be happy to talk to him about non-cognitivism and why I think that's not really the best way to approach anti-realism. Not that I really find it to be the worst thing in the world or anything. It's not like I'm like, that's a ridiculous view. I think it's just not the right approach. But it's hard to get that conversation going. I can't speculate on what's going on with Alex because I know he's very busy. He does lots of stuff. But as far as Ask Yourself, if I had to guess, and what the heck, I'll just go and speculate about it. Ask Yourself did abandon veganism some time ago, and sorry, not Ask Yourself. My bad.
You know what Isaac, right? Yeah,
Alex O'Connor. My mistake. Yeah. You're gonna have to edit that out. I don't even want someone having that thought for a second. Because
that's okay. That happened with me as well just now. So Isaac and Alex, they kind of look like similar names, so it's easy to confuse.
Yeah. No, just a brain fart. So Alex stopped being a vegan, and he may be concerned that Isaac or Ask Yourself is going to press him on that issue if they ended up having a conversation. So
that's that as well.
Yeah. So that might be a factor.
Isaac told me that he could be bad faith or something, because there has been a lot of tries to contact Alex, but he has been evasive. I don't know. So the biggest critique is going to be about veganism rather than this one, because this is just a tiny nuance in metaethics. But yeah, veganism, he has a lot of objections there, and that it would be a fun conversation.
Yeah, and I would encourage him to confront that head on and have those conversations, if he wants to. But I also, I'm sympathetic to people not wanting to have certain conversations in certain contexts for various reasons. Right. I certainly don't discuss. Every single topic people want to bring up with me, there are certain topics I am not willing to discuss, or at least not willing to discuss, like on a YouTube channel. I might have a private conversation with people. So I don't know what his reasons are, and he may have good reasons for not wanting to have those conversations. He may not. I couldn't say. And
one has to pick one's fights, right? It's important.
Well, there's that. There's also, there could be personal reasons. Some people may want to avoid a conversation because they know they're going to get just destroyed. People may also want to avoid a conversation because there might be personal issues at stake that they don't want to bring to the surface and discuss publicly. Exactly. I don't know. And one norm I would encourage people to have is, well, I'm fine with people being critical of others for, publicly taking a stance on an issue, renouncing the issue, not engaging when people criticize them for it, all that stuff. I do want people to be more compassionate and cautious with accusations of bad faith or evasiveness. I'm not saying anything specifically about Ask Yourself with that sort
I
of
hold
thing.
the same view,
Yeah, just generally speaking, people, because maybe they have interactions I don't know about. So maybe his accusations are perfectly in point and are well informed by information I don't have access to. So this is not anything to do with that particular issue, like the specific issue we're discussing. I'm making a general point, which is that people often don't want to have conversations for good reasons. They don't want to give those reasons, and I think that that's fine. And often I think people are very quick to impute ill intent on other people. Again, I'm not talking about this particular interaction. I'm talking about in general. I see tons of instances in which people say other people are disingenuous, bad faith, lying, pretending. This happens to me a lot. I endorse, qualia quietism. I'm critical of views about consciousness that take seriously the hard problem of consciousness. I endorse more, moral anti-realism, pragmatism, a lot of views that are less common. And often when I encounter people that are critical of those views, they will actually question whether I actually hold the views that I say that I do. And that's very frustrating. So, I think people do need to be cautious with those sorts of remarks. Okay. Anyway, should we keep going?
Yeah, sure.
Or did you have more to say about that?
No, nothing more.
Cool. Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
That doesn't tell us that they desire the same thing, right? So that doesn't tell us that there aren't irresolvable value differences. So by analogy, if we say that everyone likes the tastes that they like, that doesn't tell us that everyone likes the same tastes. So that doesn't give us a reason to think that there aren't irresolvable differences of taste. Another analogy, I guess, if we say that everyone likes the art that they like, that doesn't give us a reason to think that there aren't irresolvable conflicts of art preference, because that doesn't tell us that they like the same art, right? Hopefully you guys all appreciate that point. Now, I know what he's...
Yeah, so just to comment on this, I think this is a devastating set of points. It does make me think, if like pleasure and pain are just reducible to preferences, and I can have my preferences and you could have your preferences, well, what if I derive my pleasure from doing a thing that would cause you pain? It seems like you could easily, trivially get potential conflict out of this. I mean, something very strange about this, that people couldn't have conflict. Well, me liking what I like and you liking what you like, and me deriving pleasure from what I like and you deriving pleasure from what you like, doesn't mean we like the same things. We could just like different things, and we could come into conflict for that reason. What if I would like to have your money and you would like me to not have your money? What? Now we've got a conflict. It would give me pleasure to have your money. It would not give you pleasure for me to have your money. So, I think there's a very serious problem with what Alex is proposing here.
To be fair, the response that Alex would have is that now you think that you wanting to have my money is a good thing, but eventually you will realize that it's not a good thing for yourself. But yeah, even if you break that down to the ultimate level, but still you can actually have value differences.
Yeah, so someone could say in extremis, like under ideal conditions, like if I was fully informed and ideally rational, I would value the same, like overall, like global state of affairs as everyone else. Like we would all converge in principle. Okay, I'd like to know if he does think that, why he thinks that. I would wonder what the argument for that would be. I don't see any reason in principle why you couldn't create a being that is incorrigible with respect to conflicting interests with what it wants the world to be like. Maybe at that point one would say that being is like sort of exempted from agency, but then we're going to have a problem there where it may be that the way he would define what makes something sentient or an agent or whatever it is that entails convergence under ideal conditions just is something that by definition would converge. So, hey, if your convergence would eventually happen among all agents, okay, well, what is an agent? An agent is a being that would converge under ideal conditions. I mean, it would be another triviality. So, this
reminds me of a joke, So it's like this kind of funny, like what was that? So I ask you, where's your home? So you say that my home is near David's home. But where is David's home? David's home is near my home. So there's no content there. You're not specifying where exactly your house is, right?
Yeah, and this is exactly the kind of verbal bewitchment that Wittgenstein draws attention to that I think is so characteristic of the way a lot of analytic philosophy operates and the way a lot of people are sort of taught to think and reason when doing philosophy. And I think that's a problem. And I wish more people were attentive to language, when they were doing philosophy. Isaac approaches this from the perspective of logical precision and clarity, and he likes to break things down and sort of break down the logical structure of what people are saying. And that's one approach that can bring clarity to these sorts of discussions. And Isaac has done just exceptionally well with doing this in a way that I don't even see a lot of professional philosophers with the level of laser precision with logic that Isaac has. It's
Exactly.
it's very impressive. And it's not my approach. I actually take a different approach. And what's interesting,
And he's
about
humble,
that-
and he says that he's not even as good as other logicians in the world. I'm not even close, like 10% close to those logicians. I'm thinking who those logicians are. I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, I don't know who he has in mind. There are
Right.
probably professional logicians that are absolutely phenomenal at this. Unfortunately, I don't interact with them very much. I think that that's very likely to be true, that there's like professors of logic that would just obliterate all of us. Because it reminds me of people that I've run into that work in or adjacent to psychology that their knowledge of statistics is just bananas. Like, I can't even fathom the depth of knowledge that they have, and the way that they handle data is just extraordinary, and I could never approach it. Like, if I spent the rest of my life trying, I couldn't keep up with them. And so I'm aware of people with that kind of expertise and talent and ability in statistics. So I certainly wouldn't surprise me at all if there's people that are that great with logic. It's an unfortunate thing, though, that a lot of the talent, skills, and expertise that philosophers have is confined to academic publications that are frequently behind paywalls where nobody reads them. And I think that's really sad, because, look, I'm very critical of philosophy, but that I'm critical of it because I think that it has deep gouges in it that we could fill in with a lot better stuff. But that doesn't mean that it as plodding along and as slow and as poor of progress it's made, it doesn't mean it's made no progress at all. It doesn't mean it's contributed nothing. There's so much. Like, there's a reason I stick around. It's because I want to see something. I want to see it be better. But that doesn't mean that there aren't just dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands, of brilliant philosophers doing great work all the time in the cracks and crannies of the mainstream analytic approach, which I have huge problems with. And people that are really good at logic are some of those people. Student after student could walk through a class on intro to logic class. I don't know how much it helps students that end up going into law or other sorts of areas, but I bet it helps. And I suspect broader education in logic, especially with the ability to and practice at applying it in practical cases, would be extremely beneficial for people.
Absolutely.
And that I say that in spite of the fact that I frequently criticize misuses of logic, both within academic philosophy, but more importantly for me, or more prominently, because philosophers are, in most cases, I think, actually pretty careful with logic, fortunately, which is a good thing. But in a lot of sort of everyday disputes, you'll see people say, "What's your syllogism? What's your argument? Give me the syllogism. Give me the syllogism." And often their requests are premature and not really necessary. So if I clearly lay out an argument where you could reconstruct like a modus ponens from it or something, and you go, "No, but I want it, present the syllogism yourself," that's just, it's often used as a conversation stopper to force a person to jump through hoops. It's misused a lot. People just want empty formalism for the sake of it. A lot of it might be motivated by this desire to like signal one's own competence or engagement with the philosophy, show how sophisticated you are, or something like that. But it's the same thing with people.
I've seen that happening a lot in his server, Isaac's server. That happens a lot in that server. But yeah.
It happens a lot in a lot of debate spaces. It's all over the place, where people will just demand formalization without understanding an appropriate context in which you employ it. Isaac demands formalization when people are being ambiguous or unclear or evasive, and he does it to see, in many cases, look, if people are cooperative with their unclear arguments, Isaac will actively collaborate with people he's criticizing to iron out and steel man their positions. He will do that, and I've seen him do that. But a lot of people, when they feel cornered with demands to precisify and clarify what they're arguing, they get evasive, they get reluctant, and I think that his approach frequently exposes that people simply don't know what the hell they're talking about, or they have bullshit arguments and they don't want them to be, maybe sometimes they do know they're full of shit and they don't want that exposed. I think that's certainly possible. I mean, it'd be remarkable if nobody is ever self-aware enough to know they're full of shit. Some people have to be. But a lot of times, I think people may just be embarrassed by the dawning recognition that they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sure that's the case in most of the cases.
yeah, and then sometimes people present syllogisms, and I've seen Isaac be like, "Okay, that works." Like, I've seen that too. It's not like everybody he talks to doesn't know what they're talking about. So, But those contexts are ones where Isaac will specifically say, here is what I'm not understanding. Here is how you could help me understand it. But a lot of times when people throw this, give me the argument at you, it's a sort of reflexive, lazy, thoughtless thing that they're doing. It's like they're trying to pantomime real debates because they don't actually know how to have a discussion.
Right.
Yeah.
Just trying to show off. So.
I think that's part of it. Yeah, a lot of people see these. A lot of people appear to me to treat debates as an opportunity to fight and cause drama.
And to boast and brag, some of them.
Yeah, normal human impulses. All right, let's keep going.
He's going to have to do once he appreciates the problem I'm raising is either accept the synonymous definitions and then lose the force of this argument against irresoluble value differences, or reject the synonymous definitions, then provide definitions which aren't synonymous and show a necessary entailment between desire and pleasure. And then maybe he can retain the force of his argument. So 2 pathways, either they're synonymous or they're not. If they are synonymous, this argument loses force, we need a new one. If they're not synonymous, then we need definitions and a demonstration of a necessary entailment.
My whole point, my whole argument when I make this case is to essentially show that what you desire and what you think will maximize your pleasure are synonymous concepts, are synonymous concepts, are synonymous concepts, are synonymous concepts.
Okay, so everyone should just note that at this point he's committing to the synonymity pathway. Now, in a minute, I actually force him to concede that that doesn't make sense.
Psychologically speaking, that's my whole point, which is why I don't think one can exist without the other.
Okay, so I want to
because they are just.
Your mic, can you say it again?
I was just going to say, would it perhaps be better to say that one's contingent, as you were saying, where it all reduces down to the wanting the pleasure. So when you say, like, I want to do this, it's not the same thing. It's more that is contingent on this, and perhaps a fact about the world.
Well, if they're synonyms, they're just literally the same thing. It can't be that something's contingent. Well, is it contingent on itself?
I'm not sure if it's most helpful to think of it as synonymous or not. That's something that I'd be willing to discuss and debate. But it's certainly one or the other, and whichever one it is, the point is essentially the same. Either desire is a derivative of pleasure in the sense that what you desire is by definition what you think will maximize your pleasure, or they are just synonymous concepts.
Now, as you can see, he committed to the synonymity pathway a second ago, but now he's kind of waffling on it.
So everyone desires pleasure is a claim that you're making, right?
Yes, everyone desires their own pleasure.
Okay,
yeah.
So here's my critique. So if they are synonymous, it is circular. It's just saying everyone desires desire, right? So it's the tautology, I guess, would be the right term.
Yes, absolutely.
Wait, everyone desires desire. Wait, okay, I don't know what the perfect way to think about that. I have to think about that for a sec. But the point is, it's not really saying a whole lot.
Well, it is a tautology, because you could say, like,
well, it's not saying desire is desire, but
if X is desired, then X is desired, is essentially what you're saying.
Yeah, okay, that's a perfect way to frame it, because it's like if we're saying if you desire something, or if something is pleasurable, then you desire it. That sentence, it'll be more clear what the problem is. It's just saying, like, if something is desirable, then that thing is desirable. Then it's clear. It's kind of tautologous. It's just the semantics of how I put my sentence together the first time. Okay, so
they're done here. Like, what he's saying is vacuous. How is this? What's the next 20 minutes or something? Like,
so I think he lays up an argument. Isaac lays up an argument against Alex. That's what one of the things is, and yeah, they go a bit deeper on this, I guess. I don't remember.
Okay,
it's been quite some time since I watched this one. Yeah, let's see.
So this is my kind of analysis. So if they're synonymous, it's just like a tautology, and I don't see how it's. Yep. And then if it's not, then I kind of want the, like, conceptual analysis of, like, what desire is and what pleasure is, and also why they must be connected. And also, I didn't intend to get in a big debate about this with you, so we don't have to, like, go forever.
But hold on, you cut yourself short then, which is what a lot of people do. They go, well, if they're just synonymous, then I don't see what is the. And then you just moved on. Like, what don't you see? What's the problem with them being what's the problem with that statement being a tautology?
Well, a tautology is always true. Like, you desire desire.
It's kind of funny watching that. I've definitely lost track at that moment right there. You always desire what you desire. But he presses me, and then I remember the pathway again.
I like that he's criticizing himself here. Yeah, because well, you always desire what you desire. What is he talking about? Yeah, this is a strange move for Alex to make to say like, well, what's the problem with this? Like, it's one of those cases where I'm kind of incredulous because the problem with it is, to me, so obvious it's hard to even articulate it. It's like someone saying, hey, so you don't have any evidence, reasons, arguments, or any reason at all to think your view is true, but you think it's true anyway. And they're like, yeah. And you're like, you don't think it's non-inferentially justified. You're not a foundationalist. You don't think it's an accident. No.
Yeah, the first time I heard him say that, so it's a tautology, but what's the problem with that? I found that really strange, but that's exactly the problem. Like, you're not specifying what these two terms mean, or you're not adding content to that argument. Like, everyone desires desire. So what? Do everyone desire the same desires, same content of the desires or not? He's not specifying that, and so that was really weird for me.
Yeah, I'm curious what Isaac will say as like to clarify what the issue with that is. So let's just have a look. I could speculate or start trying to shoot from the hip with what I would think I would say, but I think what I would say would be pretty dumb. I think I'd have to take a minute to think about it. So Isaac short-circuiting for like 5 seconds totally makes sense. It's a strange move for Alex to make at this point. It's a good move if you want to see the problem with the view, though. Like if it's genuine curiosity, I think it's a good thing that he asked. So let's see.
I love that calm, collected response. Like just saying like, and what's the problem? Which is fair, because at this point I've completely forgotten what it was I was trying to say. But then I go, okay, fuck, I have to think about it, and then I recall it properly, thank God.
Okay, so let's think about how we got here. So you were saying that everyone has a desire for pleasure, but then it sounds like all you're saying is just like everyone has like desires or something. It doesn't, it's not, it's then it's like the similarity everyone has on your view is just that they have desire. Yeah. It's not that they have a shared, can I finish this? It's not that they have a shared goal of something like pleasure. That's then the basis of all hypothetical norms that can be the value you appeal to say there's no irresolvable value difference. If desire just means desire, then sure, everyone can have desires, but that doesn't mean that they have the same desire at the base that we can reduce things down to and say there's some kind of like general standard that we can always argue someone to a position from.
Critique remembered. Definitely need to smoke less weed.
Yeah, which is why I think it is helpful to think of pleasure as a separable concept, but
which would make them not synonymous. So I'm sensing the lack of clarity here, and that's like, it's like blood in the water. Again, I'm not trying to fucking make Alex look dumb or anything. I'm just trying to make him appreciate a problem. And I think it's totally legitimate that he didn't think of this. It's a pretty technical kind of linguistic problem.
The problem is like...
I think you need to, or else I think you get this, like, it just becomes a tautology, and then you lose the force of what you're trying to... Like, wait, let's see if we agree on this, because maybe I'm missing something.
So this is where I'm kind of, like, buckling in for the ride. I'm like, no, I'm going to get him to concede that they can't be synonyms or concede that this argument loses its force. We're going one way or the other here, boys.
Sure, if it's just all you're saying is desire, then you'd agree you're not going to have that foundation anymore to say there's no irresolvable value differences because everyone desires the same thing, because all you're saying is everyone has desires at that point, and those desires could be for different things. And if everyone can desire different things, it seems like you could have irresolvable value differences.
Well, then you could just...
Yeah, I think he just nails them right here.
Yeah.
There's no way out of that. It's one or the other, and either way he goes, it's either he concedes or he concedes. This is a lose-lose for Alex.
Rephrased it in the sense that everybody has an interest in fulfilling their desires, and so you can make objective derivatives about how those desires can be fulfilled.
Now, at this point, Alex tries to change around the language a bit to see if he can get around
the desires. You're not.
I want to take back a bit.
Critique remembered. Definitely need to.
I want to see the whole critique from the beginning.
The problem, which is fair, because at this point I've completely forgotten what it was I was trying to say. But then I go, okay, fuck, I have to think about it, and then I recall it properly, thank God.
Okay, so let's think about how we got here. So you're saying that everyone has a desire for pleasure, but then it sounds like all you're saying is just like everyone has like desires or something. It doesn't. It's not. It's then it's like the similarity everyone has on your view is just that they have desire.
Yeah.
It's not that they have a shared. Wait, can I finish this? It's not that they have a shared goal of something like pleasure. That's then the basis of all hypothetical norms. That can be the value you appeal to say there's no irresolvable value difference. If desire just means desire, then sure, everyone can have desires, but that doesn't mean that they have the same desire at the base that we can reduce things down to and say there's a some kind of like general standard that we can always argue someone to a position from.
Critique remembered. Definitely need to smoke less weed.
Yeah, which is why I think it is helpful to think of pleasure as a separable concept, but
which would make them not synonymous. So I'm sensing the lack of clarity here, and that's like, it's like blood in the water. Again, I'm not trying to fucking make Alex look dumb or anything. I'm just trying to make him appreciate a problem. And I think it's totally legitimate that he didn't think of this. It's a pretty technical kind of linguistic problem.
The problem is like
I think you need to, or else I think you get this like it just becomes a tautology, and then you lose the force of what you're trying to like. Wait, let's see if we agree on this because maybe I'm missing something.
So this is where I'm kind of like buckling in for the ride. I'm like, no, I'm going to get him to concede that they can't be synonyms or concede that this argument loses its force. We're going one way or the other here, boys.
Sure. If it's just all you're saying is desire, then you'd agree you're not going to have that foundation anymore to say there's no irresolvable value differences because everyone desires the same thing, because all you're saying is everyone has desires at that point, and those desires could be for different things. And if everyone can desire different things, it seems like you could have irresolvable value differences.
Well, then you could just rephrase it in the sense that everybody has an interest in fulfilling their desires, and so you can make objective derivatives about how those desires can be fulfilled.
Now, at this point, Alex tries to change around the language a bit to see if he can get around the critique. I'm definitely not suggesting he's doing that in a Weasley way or anything. He just is still not really appreciating the extent of the problem here. So he's just trying to reformulate and see if it gets around the issue. But I'm pretty comfortable and confident at this point in the conversation. I'm just looking at his language and I'm going, is he actually explaining what the shared desire at the base is? No, he's just saying that there's going to be facts of the matter about how to achieve certain desires. Well, that doesn't establish that everyone has the same desire. You still have the same problem.
Wait, but you're going to have that same problem unless the actual desire at the base or desire set is the same. If you're just saying everyone has desires, then there can be irresolvable value differences. People just desire different things.
Right, and saying that there's going to be objective facts about what's derivative of those values, like, okay, so I desire X, you desire Y. There's objective facts about how I could obtain X. There's objective facts about how you could obtain Y. Doesn't mean that we end up not coming into conflict. So that does not help Alex get around this at all. It just doesn't do anything to help him. So Alex tried an evasive maneuver here, but it just totally doesn't work at all. And again, like Isaac is saying, I don't see that as like weaselly or intentional or anything. It's just, I think he's groping for a way out of the trap, and he's it's a bit of flailing here, and it doesn't work like at all.
I think I'd probably grant that actually, which is why I suppose then, yes, it does make sense to think of pleasurable as a
so I think you have to go down that road. I think you're going to have to say that pleasure and desire are separate.
Okay, so that's a perfectly clear concession. He says he's going to have to grant that part of the critique, and I say, okay, so you're going to have to say that they're separate. He says yes. So now I open the other pathway, and I say, okay, well, if they're not...
Sorry?
And you'll have to define both of those, what pleasure and desire exactly mean. Yeah,
so if he wants to give up on them being analytically equivalent, like synonyms of one another, then he's going to have to take the other route, because the one route is completely vacuous. So the only other route is to abandon the original claim and go a different way, which is, it shows that there was a problem with his position to begin with, which is that he was thinking of things as being equivalent and they weren't. Now, the concession is a good thing to do. Like, if you notice a problem, it's on your own view, it's a problem. Acknowledge it's a problem and proceed accordingly. But yeah, I guess we'll see what he does at this point.
I think he gets this from Parfit. He gets this definition from Parfit. Yeah, pleasure is something. Got it from. Sorry,
you think so? Oh no, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think there was a speech he made in Oxford or something in which he kind of derives his definition of pleasure and desire from Parfit. So pleasure is something that is desired when experienced. That's the definition he goes with. So yeah, that's again tautologous, I think. Pleasure is something that is desired when experienced.
Quite, and maybe he did. That wouldn't surprise me if he got it from Parfit. I would have thought it's also possible that he's getting some of his ideas from Sam Harris, since Sam Harris, talks about states of consciousness being the only sorts of things you could value.
Yeah, he says that, but I don't think he ends up defining these two. He gets it from Parfit. I'm quite sure, not Sam Harris. I don't think Sam Harris defines both of these terms. He doesn't go that technical in the moral landscape.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, well, I would hope people wouldn't get their characterizations of these sorts of things from Harris, because he's just so astonishingly unclear on this topic.
Yeah, he's vague. He's vague.
Yeah, well, all right.
Let's get back.
To say that they're separate. And he says, yes. So now I open the other pathway. And I say, okay, well, if they're not synonymous, we're going to need definitions of both terms and a demonstration of a necessary entailment.
But then someone can do kind of like, okay, well, are they brain states? And then you have this empirical problem of you have to show what the brain states are and that they always entail each other. And if you can't do that, then just asserting it will turn into like question begging, basically.
Yeah, that's where things get tricky. But
I think we can get there another way.
Okay, so as you can tell, at this point, Stephen starts talking, and Alex and I actually don't return to arguing this specific point in the conversation again. So we'll stop the playback there. Now, I just want to do two more things in this video. I want to show you guys a formalized version of my critique, and I want to show how current statements that Alex is making raise the critique. I'll do the formal part last, because I know a bunch of you friggin' lamos are going to tune out the second I start saying, oh, here's a syllogism, proposition, whatever, okay? So let's look at what Alex is currently saying, then I'll give the syllogism, and then we'll call it a video. So here are some clips from a recent debate Alex did on human rights. I'll link it down below, and I'll also link my conversation with Alex, Stephen, and Richard down below.
That's not the kind of pleasure that I'm talking about at the basis of my ethics. Instead, I'm using a broader, more philosophical definition, and that is in line with Derek Parfit, that says that pleasure is simply, by definition, what is one.
I fully concede that you're correct. I think that's pretty clear. That's exactly what he's doing. You could also see the Oxford sign behind him.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I remember the video.
I do not, clearly. Very cool. All right.
Wanted when experienced, and suffering is the opposite, what is not wanted when experienced. Notice this is somewhat tautological. So to ask the question, why do we want the maximization of pleasure? Why do we want the minimization of suffering? I think is self-evident.
Now, I can understand on some level what might be motivating Alex to adopt a definition of pleasure like this. I'm just speculating here. I don't know what's going on in his head. But if he says that pleasure is just a synonym for desire, or the object of desire, or using his current language, that which is wanted, aka desired when experienced, it becomes trivially easy to defend this claim that he wants to defend, which is that everyone desires pleasure, right? Of course everyone desires the object of their desire. Of course everyone desires what they want, aka desire, when experienced, right? That all becomes trivial. But the problem is, Alex, if you adopt a definition like that, you open yourself up to my critique. Someone can just say, okay, well, that doesn't tell us what they desire, so you're not giving us any kind of reason to think that there can't be irreconcilable value differences, or, using your language, irresoluble conflicts of interest.
Consider an analogy, for example. Let's say we lived in a universe, or imagined a universe, in which it was necessarily true of its inhabitants that everybody's favorite color was blue. Right? Everybody preferred blue, subjectively, but everybody shared it. Right? When faced with decisions about what color to paint the town, right, you can objectively derive, with the assumption of the goal of blueness, that the color to paint it would be blue. Now, the desire itself is subjective, but because everybody shares it, this isn't a problem, and you can have objective ways to achieve that goal. The thing that we're interested in justifying, of course, is the goal. But once you have that goal, and once we recognize that pleasure is something that we do desire universally, there can be objective ways to get there. And if someone came along and said, no, I want to paint the town yellow, I think that's what we should do, right? They would not be entitled to say, this is all subjective. The desire for blueness is subjective. If I want it to be yellow, why is that any more legitimate or less legitimate than your desire for it to be blue? Because they're being internally incoherent. If we're living in a world where they necessarily think that blue is the best color, then I can show them, you think that to paint the town yellow is the thing to achieve our goal here. But I also know that you necessarily think that blue is the preferable color, and I can show objectively
that. What? This is strange.
Yeah.
is the thing to achieve our goal here. But I also know that you necessarily think that blue is the.
You necessarily think something? Does he? I wonder. It's just strange to say that someone necessarily thinks something. I don't typically think facts about what people think is necessary.
This reminds me of our last critique that we made of Alex Conant. This was exactly the critique that we were making. Like, everyone necessarily desires their pleasure. So that's not the case, obviously. They desire a bunch of things, not necessarily pleasure.
Well, if someone says, insofar as a person has desires, they necessarily desire the desires that they have, you could say something like that. That would be true.
Yeah.
Like, insofar as I have a favorite color, I necessarily like the color that is my favorite color. But it's equivalent to saying it's necessarily the case that if you like something, you like it. It's completely empty.
Yeah.
It's the only way I can make sense of the necessity claim. Like, I don't think he could have it both ways. He can't. I don't think he can convincingly convey simultaneously both that something is necessary and non-trivial in this context.
Right.
And I think that's fundamental to Isaac's point.
The preferable color, and I can show objectively that they do not fit together, right? It's an internal inconsistency, right? Yes, sure, the desire for blueness is subjective, but if they come along and say that they want to paint the town yellow, they are wrong. If they think that that's how to achieve their goal, they are wrong.
Now, that's a bad analogy, and the fact that Alex would deliver this analogy shows me exactly what it is that he's missing. So I'll explain why it's a bad analogy, and I think this will do a ton of work towards elucidating exactly what the pickle is that Alex has gotten himself into here, okay? Blue has additional features. It is not just defined as the color that we prefer. We know, for example, the wavelength of blue light. If we define blue in the same kind of way as Alex defines pleasure, we'll get the same problem, okay? So let's say that we define blue as the color that we prefer, okay? We're not told a wavelength or anything like that. Blue just means the color that we prefer. Now, when Alex says we live in a world where everyone prefers blue, all he'd be saying is we live in a world where everyone prefers the color that they prefer. If someone then comes around and says, hey, I'd like to paint the town yellow, you can't say they're wrong with respect to the goal of painting the town blue. So I think it's clear that Alex still has the same problem on his view, and that he...
Yeah, man, this is such a good criticism from Isaac.
Right.
It's basically blue is serving as a stand-in for a term that's just sort of it's dynamically related to the very thing that we prefer in the first place. So everyone wants to paint the town, quote, blue. But what does blue mean?
Want to paint the town, right?
Yeah,
he's
blue
not specifying the content.
Right, exactly. And it's misleading audiences because, as Isaac points out, blue or in ordinary contexts does have a specific content. But the only way for this analogy to work, so either it's disanalogous in a way that completely makes it irrelevant to the point that that Alex wants to make, in which case it's a bad analogy. It doesn't do the work it needs to do. If he wanted to try to make it do the work it needs to do, then blue needs to serve the exact same role that desire or pleasure is serving. I think pleasure. We desire our pleasure. It would have to serve the same role that pleasure is serving in the previous discussion that they were having. And once you flesh out what he is committed to saying about blue in that context, for it to serve as that analogy, it would have to be that color which we prefer. Now, what Alex wants to do is show that people cannot have disagreements or conflicts in what they desire. And this blue analogy makes it look like that makes sense, maybe misleadingly and superficially, but it really doesn't, because actually blue here is just a stand-in for the color people prefer, and then it gives the impression that people in this context couldn't coherently prefer different things from one another. But all it amounts to, because then what is yellow? Yellow is something you don't prefer. So then a person comes along and says, hey, I know we all prefer this, but I actually prefer this thing that I don't prefer. What? I mean, that's what that ends up sounding like once you unpack, what blue and yellow are doing here. And this is an interesting thing Alex is doing, because I routinely critique philosophers, and this is part of what I ended up critiquing in some follow-up blog posting that I did after the discussion with Mike Humer. is, philosophers will use language that has ordinary language connotations, like it serves certain roles, functions in plain language, and then they'll extract the same that terminology. It's the same words they're using and phrases they're using, and they'll redeploy it in some other context, and sort of simultaneously, like a Necker cube, give both the impression that they're using it in that ordinary context, but they're actually using it in some other context. And they'll play on the sort of conflation or ambiguity between those two readings to sort of wedge their view in by giving people a misleading implication that if they reject the philosophers' extra stuff that they're baking into their philosophical conception of the view, that they would have to reject the ordinary conception of the same use of that terminology, which is in fact different. So I'm not saying people do this intentionally. I think that philosophers have fallen victim to imputing or projecting extra philosophical presuppositions onto language that serves various sort of functional and pragmatic roles in everyday life, usually these sort of social roles that it plays. Philosophers come up with theories or accounts, and they bake in all these metaphysical presuppositions and all these other sort of very semantically rigid and fixed conceptions of what this or that term commits one to or means. And then they sort of vacillate between that philosophical reading of a term or phrase with the ordinary socio-functional reading of a term or phrase, which is largely cashed out, in my view, actually entirely cashed out through pragmatics and its use in its contexts of usage. And they mix the two up, and they don't notice. I don't think this is intentional. And I think Alex is doing exactly that. I think Alex has fallen victim to this sort of this analytic. We would have to come up with a term for it, because I haven't seen anybody talk about this particular way of conflating some set of terminology with some other set of terminology. But Alex is sort of doing that here with blue and yellow. He's playing on the audience mixing up blue and yellow as ordinary language terms that do pick out specific things.
Is the word that you're looking for equivocation? Because it reminds
I
you
take
of the
equivocation.
fallacy.
No. Equivocation in the midst of a syllogism is when you're using the term, let's say in premise 1, you use a term, and then in premise 2, you use that same term, but you actually mean something different.
Okay.
So you would get equivocation when you sort of switch up what you mean. And so there's a kind of equivocation here, so you could call it that. But this is something distinct. It's not equivocation in like the formal sense of changing what you mean by a term in the middle of a syllogism. It's sort of the conflation is co-occurring. It's simultaneous. And philosophers will even say sometimes that, oh, no, I'm just using the term in the ordinary sense. And it's like, well, hold on, but you're presupposing that the ordinary sense is also, or in addition, the technical sense that you're using, or this very specific sense that you're using the terminology. And I'm not obligated to grant that. But philosophers will often help themselves to these presumptions by saying that their view is commonsensical, it is intuitive. There's a lot of like really tricky stuff that goes on with language. But yeah, so in this context, Alex's analogy may be rhetorically effective on an audience because of the conflation between blue and yellow in the ordinary sense and blue and yellow in the sense that the only sense in which they could work is if they were being used in a way that doesn't actually take on their typical meaning in ordinary context of usage. You would have to be using them in some technical and weird sense. And the only way so that technical and weird sense, if he were using it explicitly in that way, would be like sort of immediately and obviously vacuous. The vacuity of it would be transparent. And so the vacuousness of the philosophical technical conception that he's employing is concealed behind the ordinary language analogs of that terminology. And so you have to sort of simultaneously employ language that is both being used in the technical sense and the non-technical sense, so as to give the impression that the problem is borne out as a result of its technical sense. But this is sort of smuggled through the impression you're giving people of the associations they have with that same language in the ordinary sense. I don't know if I explained that super well, but I give examples and I explain this in more detail on my blog, like in several different blog posts. I go into detail about this exact problem and how it occurs.
Is
I do
what
think
you're
that's going
saying
on.
something related to Wittgenstein's private language argument or something? I'm not sure. I haven't read that.
Yeah, I don't know how much it relates to Wittgenstein's private language argument. I mean, you get these like his beetle in the box type of thing, and there are some similarities there in what I think that he's getting at. But I find private language stuff rather obscure. I'm not quite sure I'm fully grokking what he's up to there, and there are points where it doesn't look like from what little I've seen of it. I'm like, I don't know if I buy in all of that. To me, a lot of this, I don't know if we need to go so far as to articulate what Wittgenstein appears to be getting at to point out some sort of a identifiable type of vacillation or equivocation between different uses or senses of a term in argumentative contexts in ways that can reliably and systematically mislead audiences. I don't know that you need a particular conception of the way human cognition works or languages work or like potentially really questionable views about any of this. I think that the kind of critique I'm making is consistent with someone not really buying into Wittgenstein's views.
Okay. Let's go ahead.
He needs to address this critique. Now, I'm going to just quickly formalize what I've been saying here so that we have some kind of formal structure we can go off and the argument doesn't get, broken telephone to death. I want people to be able to refer to a clear syllogism. Okay, here we go. Premise 1. If pleasure is a synonym for desire, then it's not the case that irreconcilable value differences are impossible in virtue of everyone having the same fundamental desire. Premise 2. If it's not the case that pleasure is a synonym for desire, then you need to define desire and pleasure and show a necessary entailment. Conclusion, therefore, either it's not the case that irreconcilable value differences are impossible in virtue of everyone having the same fundamental desire, and or you need to define desire and pleasure and show a necessary entailment. And here's the syllogism one more time modified to deal with the color example, just for clarity's sake. Premise 1, if blue is a synonym for desired color, then it's not the case that irreconcilable color preference differences are impossible in virtue of everyone fundamentally desiring blue. Premise 2, if it's not the case that blue is a synonym for desired color, then you need to define desired color and blue and show a necessary entailment. Conclusion, therefore, either it's not the case that irreconcilable color preference differences are impossible in virtue of everyone fundamentally desiring blue, and or you need to define desired color and blue and show a necessary entailment. I'm also going to give a visual explanation because I think that different people benefit from different modes of explanation. Some people like direct logical explanation, some people like analogies. I've already given both of those. Some people like visuals. I really like visuals. I find them super useful. So here we go. Here are agents 1 and 2. They both have desires. Their desires are the ovals. You can see they have a fundamental desire in blue. They have higher order desires, and those are in gray or what looks to me, although I'm colorblind, like yellow. So the shared higher order desires are in gray, and the unshared higher order desires are in yellow. You can also see that the fundamentality of the desire increases as we move downward in the image, and you can see that in the case of agent 1, there's a correct relation between the higher order desire and the fundamental desire, and in the case of agent 2, there's an incorrect relation between the higher order desire and the fundamental desire. So when Alex is telling you, sometimes a person will tell you that they want something, but they're ultimately wrong because what they fundamentally want is pleasure, and this thing won't bring them pleasure, right? This is the kind of idea. It's like you think you have this higher order desire, but really that's misaligned with the fundamental desire.
You're on mute.
When he says higher order desire, I would have thought he would use lower order desire. I tend to use higher order to mean the more fundamental. So the language threw me a little bit here.
Yeah. I would think so too, but higher order.
It's not a big deal.
Okay.
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense of this graph because here higher order, if he were using it that way, would actually mean the thing lower in the table or the image, which would be a little counterintuitive. So maybe that's why I did it that way. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
I'll just, I guess, explain this quickly. If disagreements between agents on higher order desires are resoluble by examining the relation between the higher order desire in contention and the fundamental desire, we need to have a shared fundamental desire. I'm setting aside technicalities here like divergent fundamental desires, which still lead to identical higher order desires. If pleasure just means something like that which is desired, telling us that the fundamental desire is pleasure does not give us a reason to think that we have the same fundamental desire. The reason is because you haven't specified the content of the desire. You've just told me tautologously that the fundamental desire is for whatever thing it may be for. It sounds like you're specifying the content when you say that everyone fundamentally desires pleasure, but if pleasure just means the thing that they desire, you haven't actually specified the content.
Right. By not specifying the content, what he's getting at here is if you did specify the content, it would have to be something like everybody desires, to do a specific thing, a specific action. Everyone desires to dance on Tuesdays. But if what you mean by everyone desires, pleasure is, and where pleasure means whatever it is they desire, that would be consistent with some people want to dance on Tuesday, some people don't want to dance on Tuesday, some people want to dance on Wednesday, some people don't want to dance, they want to sleep, some people want to do this, some people want to do that. And that's all consistent with saying everybody does what they, they all act in accord with the same fundamental value, because the fundamental value is whatever it is that they want, which is a bunch of different shit. So that's completely consistent with saying that sort of thing. And so failure to specify the content is just absolutely just obliterates any
This is the exact problem here in the whole critique.
Yeah, I mean, this just really does just clearly peel the layers back and show that there's a big problem here.
And you haven't given us any reason to think that in virtue of everyone desiring pleasure, which means desiring what they desire, that there can't be irreconcilable value differences. So what this really comes down to is what I would call the content specificity argument. Here's one more syllogism. Premise 1. If the content of the fundamental desire isn't specified, then higher order value divergences can't be resolved by examining the relation between higher order desires and the fundamental desire. Premise 2. The content of the fundamental desire isn't specified. Conclusion. Therefore, higher order value divergences can't be resolved by examining the relation between higher order desires and the fundamental desire. And that's just modus ponens. P implies Q, P, therefore Q. The connection between this argument and the prior argument is really just that if you take the synonymity pathway, you definitely end up with the content specificity problem. So if there's any hope of avoiding the content specificity problem, it's going to be on the non-synonymity pathway. And finally, here's a little diagram. So the bucket is the content specificity argument. So if we ask what is pleasure, if you say it's a synonym for desire, you're ending up in the bucket. If you give a tautologous definition, you're ending up in the bucket, right? If I ask which car is yours when we're looking at a parking lot and you say the car that's mine, right? That doesn't tell me which car is yours. You haven't specified.
That's just like the thing you were mentioning before, like where is your house? Oh, it's next to Dave's house. Where's Dave's house? Next to mine. It's the same sort of thing. Exactly. This kind of conversation happened to me on Substack where I asked someone what they meant by some term or phrase that they used. And they said, I mean what ordinary people mean. And then I was trying to get them, I was like, okay, well, what do ordinary people mean? And they're like, well, they mean the same thing I do. Or so, yeah, like it I don't think they said exactly that, but it was something where it was like, they mean the thing that they typically mean when they use it ordinary language. Like, which is what? And they're, the thing that they mean. Yeah, so the thing they mean is the thing they mean, which is the thing they mean, which is the thing they mean, which is what? And what's funny is if a person can come up with enough superficially different ways of rephrasing that same sort of empty type of response, they could say, look, I've answered your question. I've answered it 5 or 6 times now. What do you keep pressing me for? There was a funny exchange where I thought T-Jump did exceptionally well at the outset of a conversation he had with Eric Schwitzgable. He had Eric Schwitzgable on his channel to discuss moral realism, and T-Jump was pressing him, and he was asking him, like, well, what do you mean by that? I don't know if it was good or something like that. But Schwitzgable kept giving these sort of like empty responses, like, I don't remember exactly what he said because I don't remember it offhand. But I remember it was not a substantive response, and T-Jump pressed him and pressed him again and pressed him again. And after 2 or 3 rounds of T-Jump saying, okay, but it sounds like you're saying X is X is X is X is X, Schwitzkabel basically said, look, you can keep asking why, like all day long, like a child, but that's not, at a certain point, you have to stop with the explanations. And it's like, yeah, sure, let's agree. You have to stop at a certain point. Like, why is the sky blue? Because of light refraction. Why is there light refraction? Because that's how photons work. Why do photons work that way? Because of the laws of physics. Why are and at a certain point, you're like, I don't know, that's just how it is. That's fine. But he didn't even get one layer deep.
All right.
So at a certain point, you have to stop. Oh, you have to. Yeah, on the first question. So it might look like he gave two or three layers deep, but we could call it, like, I don't know what to call it, like the onion mirage. Like, you give the impression that you've given layers to the onion, but there's actually no layers because you haven't said anything substantive. That's what it looked like to me when I looked at the conversation. Now, I like Eric Schwitzkabel's work. I think he's done really cool work, but in that particular conversation, I think he fell flat. He wasn't able to give a good answer to that. And, a lot of times, I think when philosophers are pressed on that issue, they immediately reach for, and Parfit had a lot of self-awareness about this, to just saying, yeah, it's unanalyzable, it's inarticulable. They rarely say it's ineffable, but they'll fall back on the use of terminology that purports to appeal to concepts that they cannot express or explain the meaning at all. It's incommunicable. And they'll just say that's just how it is. They sometimes call it primitive or properly basic or something like that. And that is, I think, the Achilles heel of a lot of analytic philosophy, is that philosophers, I think, are allowed, they're getting away with falling back on this mysterious use of terminology that I don't think that there is terminology like that. I don't think there is incommunicable meaning. So, and another way to put this is, I don't think that the terms or concepts they use, if they're unable to explain what they mean, I think that is an indication. It's not a guarantee. It's not like totally dispositive, but it's a red flag that indicates that they might be saying something that isn't meaningful. And that's probably something that when I do say stuff like that, I get the most pushback for. And I find that really strange. Not that I shouldn't get pushback, or not that I don't think that I have a considerable burden to make a case for, my views about meaning. But I'm expected to make a case, but the people I'm criticizing are typically not held to anywhere near a similar standard. There's an asymmetric standard here where people just sort of allow people to say stuff, not explain what they mean, or say that it's inexplicable or incommunicable, and people are totally okay with that. And if I say, oh, whoa, hold up, I think there might be a problem here, everyone turns all the hostility on me and zero on them. There's no expectation. People don't go, wait, you can't explain what you mean. Well, why shouldn't I think you're full of crap? What are you talking about? There's just nobody's pressing people on this. They're just okay with people saying that. And one of the things I started asking, and I never get a good answer to this, is what criteria, what standards do we use to say it's appropriate for a person to make that kind of move, where I don't have to explain what I mean, it's unanalyzable, it's ineffable, it's incommunicable, whatever, in one context, but it's not appropriate in another. Because, like, what if someone says, why should I believe you're right about moral anti-realism? And I say, I appeal to the principle of lanceosity. And they're like, what? Oh, come on, what is lanceosity? I'm like, it's the principle that means I'm always right. And they're like, okay, but what is the principle? And I'm like, the principle is lanceosity. What do you mean? But what's the content of it? The content I can't convey to you. Some people just get it. I got friends over here. My whole family subscribes to lanceosity. They know I'm right. My family does not. They do not think I'm right. But, like, in principle, if I was popular enough, I could get a whole bunch of people to subscribe to lanceosity, and they'd all be going, we get it. We know we know he's right. We know what it means. A bunch of people saying they get it is not good evidence that they get it. A bunch of people could just be confused or wrong. And that's a lot of what people appealing to these concepts fall back on, is just saying, well, but I get it. Okay, but I'm not granting that there's something to get. So, regrettably, in these cases, I'm not obliged to grant that if someone claims they understand something, that therefore they do understand it. I take them to sincerely believe they understand it, and I'm not questioning their beliefs or their claims, but I'm not obligated to grant that if somebody says that they understand something, that they do. People sometimes don't understand things. So, just mere testimony is insufficient. And so I see very little by way of adequate scrutiny in the mysterious way that people use terminology in analytic philosophy. And I think it's really, really unfortunate. I don't want people to just blindly abide by my pragmatist approach to things, but approach the same issue from 100 different angles if you want. What the hell are people talking about when they make these appeals to terms and concepts and they can't explain what they're talking about? What's going on there? Why? How do we determine when this is and isn't appropriate? Because, the point of appealing to lanceosity is, as an example, it's obviously facetious, but if I were sincere, no one would take me seriously. And for like, okay, presumably for good reason. What are those good reasons? Why shouldn't we take Lancelotity seriously? Why shouldn't we take it seriously? And if we shouldn't, which I agree we shouldn't, why should we take someone seriously when they appeal to some other term or concept like, qualia or phenomenal states or, external reasons or something like that? Why should we take them seriously? Like, what standards do we use to determine when incommunicable appeals to concepts are meaningful and when they're not? And I haven't heard any good standards for this. I hear a lot of stuff that sounds to me like it's made up on the spot. It's not very plausible.
So Tijum, isn't he a moral realist? Tijum?
Yeah, he is a moral realist. Doesn't sound,
Okay.
I mean, he was doing a good job pressing another moral realist with a different conception.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know of anybody in academic philosophy that shares a similar view about moral realism as T-Jump. He has a seemingly altogether unique perspective.
I'll have to look up that video and Tijum's opinion on moral realism and maybe have a conversation with him sometime.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Let's finish this video up. I think we only have 30 seconds left.
Right.
Which car. So if there's any hope of not ending up in the bucket, it's with something else. Okay, so that's all for today. If it's not incredibly obvious, this is just an intellectual critique. There's no hate towards Alex. I think his content's great. I hope he keeps doing what he's doing, and I like him personally. And yeah, if he wants to have a debate or a discussion at any point, I'm happy to do that. And if you guys like this content, which I hope you do, please consider supporting on Patreon. I'd really appreciate that. There's also Teespring for merch.
Okay, so we're done with the video. That was it.
So,
okay, we got through it.
right. So I think if Alex ever watches this video, I think you have two people to address now. One is Lance Bush, and another is Ask Yourself, Isaac Brown. So yeah, we have put down our critique of your view. So to clarify your view now, if you've changed your view, you can come on and have a conversation with either of those, or even me for that matter. Yeah, so
I'm happy to talk to him. I'd love to see the two of you have a conversation. I think that'd be great. I think it would also be great for him to have another conversation with Isaac. I think Isaac could.
yeah, that would be
revisit
priority
this.
for me
Yeah.
when I think about it, because there are two objections that he's making. One is on veganism, and the other is on irreconcilable value differences. So I hope you address that, and I hope you have a conversation with Isaac. You can choose who you want to have a conversation with, but yeah, just if he ever watches it. Anyway, nice having a conversation with you again, Lance. We'll catch up again soon. We'll talk about some other stuff, maybe free will and stuff. We haven't spoken about free will much, have we?
No, we should find a video and then review it on a Meta Monday. You want to do that?
Cool, we can do that. Maybe the next year. By that,
You don't think you're going to be around over the next few weeks? Because I'll be around.
No.
I'll probably be doing a Meta Monday on the 9th and the 16th.
I'm going to Thailand in a couple of weeks for a week.
Nice.
Yeah, with the friends.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you ever been to Thailand?
I have not.
Okay, so maybe I'll tell you how it goes. Maybe convince you to go to Thailand.
I would absolutely love to go. I would love to go on like a food tour. Whenever I travel, all I want to do is try the food everywhere, and I don't really want to pay. Like everyone wants to go to museums and see all this. Nope, I just want the food.
Right.
It's really pretty much all I care about.
I know that about you. Do you like Thai food?
Love it. Yeah, yeah.
Thai or
for sure.
Indian?
I like them both. Yeah, don't ask me to pick.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
I mean, I'm trying to think. I've probably tried a lot lot larger of a variety of Indian food than Thai food,
Mhm.
and so that might bias me towards saying like it'd be easy to say it's better, but if I tried 10 times as many dishes from one, I guess India probably has a lot more culinary traditions. It's a lot larger, so maybe that's not a fair.
Obviously, a
comparison.
bigger country, so a lot more cuisines would be there. North
Yeah,
and
like
South.
imagine comparing all of Europe to like one other type of like Japanese food, and it's like, well, I'm not sure that's fair.
Right. So,
But yeah, tell me how it goes. I'm excited here.
Sure.
I'm stuck here. I'm not going anywhere. I mean, I might be in Brazil again at some point soon.
Mhm.
And have you had Brazilian food?
No, not really. There's not much Brazil influence in India, and there are not many Brazilians here. Not many. We can maybe count them on our fingers. I don't know, but yeah, I haven't had the chance to eat Brazilian food. I want to, really want to.
Yeah, you would have a bit of trouble if you're vegan, because especially the state that we tend to go to
Mhm.
in the South, it's a big like barbecue culture, and there's a lot of veganism and vegetarianism are on the rise there. Like, one of my favorite things there is grilled hearts of palm, or palmito, is really, really good, and it's hard to get that same kind of thing outside of Brazil. So
Okay.
the options there are growing, and they're quite good. So yeah, I think you would love it.
Yeah, I think so too. Hopefully, in the future, let's see when that future comes.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll let you go, Lance.
Right.
Another fun conversation, as always. Love talking to you. See you
Take care.
around. Take care. Have a good rest of the day. Take
You
care.
too.
Bye.